Double fisted right there, man. Saturday. Busted Pencils fully leaded. Education talk. Educated educators talking education. Dr. Johnny Lupinacci, Jacob, chairman of the board, me, Dr. Tim Slacker, and fellas, doing John and Gordy again this past Thursday morning. And John he's like, I just love that educated educators talking education line. He's like, I
Hey,
just love it. So, it's good to know we've got a fan. Uh,
wow.
yeah,
We've got a few more. We got Jacob, the producer. We got Jacob's
I
grandpa.
was
We
gonna
know
say
for a
I forgot
fact is
Jacob's grandfather. That's
we got
right.
that. We got a few. We got Matt Damon's mom,
Matt
right?
Damon's mom. Yeah, we
We
got
got some people. We got
your colleagues in Finland.
absolutely the Finns are listening. We've got a few. We've got a couple there, Tim.
Yeah.
Don't sell yourself short.
No,
Don't
it
fill your
was
brain with all that negative self-talk.
I was making fun because I really enjoy Thursday mornings getting on with John and Gordy. And actually, Johnny, Gordy was in Chicago for the protests, and Catherine Lake was guest hosting, and got to hang out with Catherine for a little bit. And Johnny, I reminded her that without Catherine Lake, Civic Media and Busted Pencils and where we are today wouldn't have happened without Catherine Lake. She was the one who said,
Agreed.
she's like, "You guys are like the car talk of education, man.
Yeah, she
We gotta
really
get you on more often and get you some more, what do you want to say? Putting a little bit of a light on what we do here at Busted Pencils." So it was fun hanging out with Catherine, fun hanging out with John. Glad to know that they love the educated educators talking education. And
But Tim, with two guys with as much hot air as we have, all it took was somebody with a hot air balloon to come by and say, "Hey, these guys have hot air. I have a hot air balloon. Let's fly." And boy, did we ever! Catherine Lake, she did pump our tires, hey, and
yeah,
give us some confidence and say, keep talking about education because you guys say it so well. It's the bedrock of democracy,
mm,
right? And we have to be, if we're not talking about what's happening in our schools and we're having a political discussion about strengthening democracy, we're missing an important key facet of that. And we said, look, you're speaking our language here. That's
yeah.
what we're talking about. So, hey, the more we got together and talked, especially with Catherine, the more the magic happened. Hey,
Yeah. Yeah, remember, I said, love doing the podcast drops Monday, Wednesdays, and Friday. Love making sure that there's a full 1 hour Saturday show, but I don't think
the
we would be
Saturday
able
broadcast, baby.
Saturday, bro. I don't think we'd be able to do what it is we do had Catherine not said, you guys are doing 5 days a week live call-in radio for a while. And boy, that was let's be honest, that was fun, but man, challenging to do. But as you say, kind of like thrown into the crucible there, and learn to kind of roll with it and take things in. Well, and here we are, the professional broadcasters that we are right now. Everybody out in civic media land listening is like, my goodness, I thought you guys were real pros. Come on. We're just some educated educators talking education. And now that we've added Jacob, chairman of the board, to the mix,
Woo!
whoo, watch out. Jacob, what do you got big plans for us, don't you?
I've got a lot of big plans. I don't want to say anything, okay, but
Huge.
let's just say we might get you guys with Ben Affleck. I'm just putting it out there. It's a possibility.
Okay.
Whoa.
Now, by that I mean I'm gonna send him an Instagram DM and we'll see. I probably not, but for the folks out there, I want them to get hyped about possibilities down
Yeah, get hyped.
down the way.
I mean, he's definitely an educated guy who likes to talk about education. So I'm sure it'd be great conversation.
We need
Well,
to expand
I
our
love it.
pool of potential guests. We can get anybody.
Get everybody in the pool. Let's go.
Get
It's a
your
pool party.
trunks.
Jacob's throwing.
I don't
Yes.
know. As long as there's no peeing in the pool, though.
Then I'm not
Oh
going.
boy,
Well,
there we
but
go.
Well, but, we do have that pool, though, that if that happens, it turns purple. So, you know.
You've got the gotcha pool.
Yeah, we got the gotcha pool, that pool that they tell you it was a little kid, they're like, "If you pee in this pool,"
Well, speaking though, Tim, speaking about peeing in pools, and also speaking about just getting thrown into the crucible of things, I can remember getting thrown into the crucible of school
oh,
at the ripe young age of almost turning. I think I was probably 5. I don't think I
s
was quite yet
s
the appropriate
screw.
age for what we're talking about today. Well, tangent to what we're talking about today. But
I
Tim, this week we've kicked a story around a little bit here at Busted Pencils. It's
Mhm,
certainly been mulled over in the media.
mhm.
And I bet you even like John and Gordy and other shows have tickled this story a bit, have touched on what's happening in New York with kindergarten. Not just any old kindergarten though, because in New York, many, for all you New Yorkers listening, especially you Manhattan Island, like the Manhattaners, right? You know about that you start pretty much before you even have kids in New York. And it's like this in other places too. There are certain elite preschools and early year education classrooms. To be specific, in New York, there's a guy picking on what's called gifted kindergarten education. So, Tim, I thought maybe we should just talk about that today,
Oh,
get into things happening in New York, because it's not only in New York City
mhm.
that kindergarteners are increasingly evaluated, but there's this whole thing where we start sorting and calling kids in particular gifted. And I'm not picking on you if you're out there and say, hey, wait a minute, but I'm gifted.
Oh,
Don't worry, we're not here to bully you.
Johnny, we're
Everybody's got
we're
their own unique contributions and gifts.
we're
But
all
that
gifted.
is,
We're all
well,
gifted
well,
on busted pencils.
technically by definition, though, if we're going like street level definition, I agree. Like we all bring unique characteristics to the conversation. I'm bringing hot air,
I
but the whole point of this though is there is an operational definition for some districts call it talented and gifted or extraordinary talent or gifted programs. Accelerated programs is another term for these particular tracks that start as early as preschool and kindergarten. And it's been in the headlines this week. So I thought, hey, let's chop it up a bit. Let's talk about one, what's happening in New York, and then two, our early memories of testing or not testing into talented and gifted programs. They might carry some
okay.
scars with us into that conversation. But
So
really,
yes,
we've been talking about testing, Tim. We've been
yeah,
talking about that. And this story runs tangent to it. So I thought, well,
yeah.
let's get into it with our
Get
listeners
into
today.
it, put it out there. Okay, what we're talking about is, yes, in New York City,
New
a
York City.
New York City, there's a mayoral race going on. Who's going to be the next mayor of New York City?
Ooh, bold
And
prediction.
yeah, and Zohran Mamdani seems to be is going to be the Democratic nominee for mayor, having won the Democratic primary, beating Mario Cuomo. However, Mario Cuomo is going to remain in the race as an independent.
Or
And
perhaps his son Andrew Cuomo.
okay.
It may be his son, Governor
Oh,
Andrew Cuomo, and
sorry,
not
that's right.
Mario Cuomo from the
Woo,
80s and
man.
90s.
Sorry, Jacob. I had a back to the future moment or something like that. Yes,
Hold on, Tim's gotta go crank up his Model T.
Andrew Andrew Cuomo, yes, is not going to accept the Democratic defeat and is going to run as an independent. Uh, Republican, not exactly sure. However, Zoran Mamdani won pretty decisively, has a lot of support, running as a Democrat, and has also pointed out that he's actually a democratic socialist. If anybody wants to know what that means, Bernie Sanders is probably our best example of a democratic socialist. We're not going to do a whole lot
What
of
about
defining.
AOC? Would AOC
AOC, yeah,
fall under
I
that
think
category?
AOC, yeah, AOC too. Um,
Yeah,
but
champion. I like what she champions. I like those ideas.
yeah, but Mom Dami is, putting out some things that people are really excited about. However, his proposal is, Johnny, to do away with the gifted and talented kindergarten program in New York City, and you were
New York City.
alluding to that. Wow, why would he do that? And boy, there's like so many different ways to talk about this because is it testing? Is it right? And as you pointed out, I mean, some people prepare their kids neonatally to get ready to be accepted into the gifted kindergarten program in New York City because it's like a major lottery win to get into this,
Yeah,
kind of things
you
where
put.
it will set your future up in
Yeah, I
in
heard.
ways, yeah, in ways that
Yeah,
are kind of incredible. And so this is one
you
of the program proposals that isn't going over well with New York City liberal elites.
New York
There
City.
he is again. So the liberal elites do not like this program, pointing it out
No,
there. So,
I don't
um,
like it either, Tim. I'm just going to go out on a limb here, and with my fellow New Yorkers out there, if you're ruffled about this, you got to take a closer look. I'm against it, so I'm excited to get in. I mean, I'm
wait,
against
what are you
talented and
against?
gifted
Okay.
programs.
Oh,
Okay.
I'm a
okay.
big fan of acts in these things, so I'm kind of excited about seeing this movement and this conversation for a number of reasons. But I'm glad that it's happening, and especially in New York. I mean, I think it's a great place to just drop the hammer on this.
Mm,
I think it's like if we're gonna end a practice that I think I hate to pick on it, but my entire time teaching, I was never really a big fan of these programs, these
mm.
tracks.
Oh,
So we could get into it, but no, I especially I'm not a fan for, you know, any determinant factor at age 5, 6 years old, other than do you know where to put the pee yet or not?
oh,
Right? Those kinds of things. Do
not
you
in
eat
not in the
crayons?
pool.
Do you eat crayons and glue? No? Okay, good. Are you learning the alphabet? You like to sing songs and you're learning to get along with others? Great. Let's get together with other people around that same age and some of the best teachers in the country, those kindergarten teachers out there. And we learn together.
Wow.
So I'm not a huge fan of the increased testing and sorting mechanisms that are pretty closely wed to these talented and gifted programs. So I'm excited to hear that we're thinking about giving them the axe places.
Wow. Johnny Lupinacci dropping a hammer, an
New York
axe,
City!
man, and a bowling ball. What right out there. I got to tell you though, if you're wondering where Tim and Jacob are on this, well, when we get back, we're going to talk to Jacob, chairman of the board, when we get back.
Choo choo!
Wow. Ooh, because they're back already. Yep. Educated educators talking education. Well, you know what that means. Busted pencils. Civic Media Saturday. If you're listening in your car, if you're listening on your radio somewhere, we appreciate it. Downloaders, we love that you also are participating whenever you can. It is, yeah, the 1 hour show. Gifted and talented. We're talking about New York City. Johnny, go ahead.
New York City!
There it is. Yes, that place. And the Democratic nominee for mayor, Zoran Mamdani is proposing to do away with the elite kindergarten gifted program. You got to hear where Johnny Lupinacci
Mhm.
was. He's like, "Good for him, man. We need to do
Yeah, I
that."
love it. I love
He's
it.
like, "I love it."
Champion this. Yep.
And I said, "Well, you haven't
I'm
heard
drinking the Kool-Aid on this one, man.
from Tim and Jacob." And I was like, "Okay, before me, how about Jacob, chairman of the board? Jacob, what are you thinking about this? And how's this sitting in your bird's nest?"
Well, over here in my nest, Tim, yeah, I think it's easy for you and Johnny to be critical because you guys were not talented or gifted as children. But for me, I was one of these talented, gifted children. I went to a cool magnet elementary school, and then I got invited to the gifted, accelerated elementary school in my city where I'm from. And the same thing in middle school. I was accepted into the gifted, accelerated thing. Now, I will say that I turned down both of those opportunities because I liked my friends. So I don't know if they actually work. I went there
Oh,
briefly and then I said, I'm okay. I like the normal people back at the normal school.
so you dropped out of giftedness.
I did. Well, no, I didn't drop out of being gifted. I'm still awesome, but I'm more of a working man's guy. So I stuck with my blue collar scholar crew back at the real
Nice.
school.
All right, all
Um,
right.
and so for me, this proposition, I like the idea of not having these cloistered clusters of the gifted. I think everybody
Cloistered
should be together.
clusters. Yes.
That's the name of this episode, cloistered clusters.
Oh
Um,
my God.
but maybe you could say, well, that's all well and good for you to say that after you had these opportunities and squandered them. Don't take it away from other people, but I think
Mhm.
overall it's good for everybody to be in one good public school. That's my thought.
Okay. Yeah. So bigger, broader issue here. And so as Johnny said, yes, I'm not going to say where this is happening again. But gifted and talented, I know some people who would criticize gifted and talented at any age because typically the assessment made to determine that has largely been some form of a numerical standardized test. And we've come a long way in recognizing that children, people have all kinds of ways to demonstrate intelligence, giftedness. In fact, we had Howard Gardner on the show a few months back talking about multiple intelligences.
Mhm.
And so when you say somebody's gifted, how do you make that determination? So, any of these gifted programs, if you're a gifted advocate out there, definitely leave some voicemails for us and some emails because we would gladly like to talk to you. But I'm always just that's my biggest issue is the narrowness of the determination. And then though too, when we talk about Johnny, you pointed out 5-year-olds and actually 4 years old in a lot of kids because they're rushing to get them in, and so a lot of parents will enroll their kids at age 4 if they qualified. Can a 4-year-old demonstrate giftedness on some form of a standardized assessment, and is that a valid score? And if a 4-year-old can't score gifted, is that really an assessment that they're not gifted? Because when they develop a little bit more a few years later, all of a sudden, holy crap, we missed them. And so do they get out there? I think there's a whole bunch of issues here, gifted and talented as even a specialness that certain kids should get this extra attention, more opportunity, however you want to describe whatever it was you gifted and talented people got when you left the classroom and left the rest of us blue collar kids to hang out and listen to teachers drone on. Um, but kindergarten, that's another issue that I think is incredibly important to point out that I'm kind of really skeptical of identifying any 4 and 5-year old as gifted. And I'm even more skeptical of saying to kids they're not at that age. The proposal here, Johnny, actually, when we dig in deep, just to make sure that we're accurate, is actually to only do away with the kindergarten gifted program to phase back
Mhm.
in, though, a third grade acceptance into gifted programs in New York City. And so, you know, I think we got some issues. Is it too young to make a determination at that age? The blowback, as we say, the liberal elites in New York City are absolutely up in arms by this. See this as an affront. And I'm going to point out to go, of course they do, because this is a privilege that they have for so long kind of hoarded and taken up for themselves. And as you pointed out, how is it that you determine somebody's gifted in kindergarten? Well, there's usually a lot of extra resources that parents bring in birth until the age of 4 and 5 that a lot of other kids don't have the opportunity to have. So there's a whole big issue there. Jacob, I'm sorry you dropped out of giftedness. I never had the chance because I failed that test. And, you know, more though, man, lots to go on. Can't wait for Johnny Lupinacci to come back and really tell us how horrible giftedness is. We'll be right back. Man, I love coming into the third segment here because it's where we get to really drone on busted pencils, fully leaded education talk, educated
Mhm.
educators talking education. New York City
New
mayoral
York
candidate.
City.
There, mayoral candidate Zoran Momdami has proposed eliminating the gifted kindergartner program in New York City. We have gone all kinds of different directions talking about this. Um, However, so if you do away with it, then what would take its place? And there was a point, Johnny. I was wondering if I can get your reaction to this, saying, okay, if you're going to get rid of it, then you need to level up the game for all kindergartners to make sure that every kindergartner in New York City gets every opportunity to demonstrate how awesome they are. And then we'll maybe consider letting you do away with the gifted program. What do you think?
No, I think I like where you're going with that, Tim. I think, people are very reactive to Zoran's you know, proposal here to cut, like you said, cut the gifted kindergarten programs. Um, because I think if we look big picture, his stance and policies proposed on education emphasize universal child care,
Mm,
right? And so he's pledged, to really work hard towards a free universal childcare system, which would benefit all students. And so, I think that early start, those early interventions for any kid in New York are more important and arguably have a bigger impact
mm,
than, sorting. And I like that you emphasize really the critique of the gifted kindergarten program isn't to, end all gifted programs or end all accelerated instruction, but just saying, hey, I don't think we should subject 4 and 5 year olds to a single high stakes assessment, right? It unfairly separates them at a young age, right? And so so then what do you do if you're not going to have these sorting mechanisms in place? Well, then you got to have something where the standard comes up, and I think that's there in the proposed, policies, primarily around universal childcare and emphasizing public school funding. Like where's that going to happen in our public schools? Well, who's paying for that? The public, right? That's the whole socialist democrat platform, right? That's that idea here that there's a strong social responsibility of the government to adequately fund public schools and especially to provide childcare, right? And I know that runs antithetical to what a lot of critics of not only Zoran, but of socialist democracies have. They say, well, that's not the job of the government, that's the job of parents, right? And so if parents aren't providing it, then that's on them. Shame on them. And sorry, kid, that's what you get for being born where you're born. So those are two very different, distinct sets of beliefs. A belief that no matter what you're born into, school, funded properly by government, provides you with a base that gives you opportunities, right? That you can work in, that you have a quality education, and that starts early. So universal childcare. But Tim, you nailed it. The critics, right? Whether they're critics of the social responsibility of governments to fund schools, or they're critics even within that. Dare we say, like liberal critics that are saying, wait, that impacts our kids' education, right? And you're trying to prioritize equity at the expense of students who need advanced instruction, right? AKA my kid's powerful elite parent that has, probably left-leaning views when it's popular, right? And in public settings are like, yes, I am a good Democrat, but not when it comes to taking resources and away from my kid and allocating them across other kids whose parents, it's their responsibility for them, right? And there's a slippery slope into a shared critique. So, hey, really great to offer our listeners. We'll plug no sponsorship here in connection, though would love to have a conversation with the folks that made the podcast I'm about to recommend. There's a great podcast on NPR, right, called Nice White Parents. And it's about affluent parents in New York City.
Ooh.
And it's really telling to the power and the politics of public schools in New York City, which have a long history, even in the public school sector, of not being so equitable, but championing a message of equity. So it's a great podcast called Nice White Parents. It isn't only talking about white folks. They do a great job of saying this is more about affluent New York culture, right? That also has a strong tinge of whiteness to it historically here, but really looks at, well, do we really care about kids, or do we mostly care about our own kids? And those things start to contradict when you look at things like, hey, we are going to invest in a public education system that provides a high floor for every single kid. And I'll even pump Zoran's tires a little more here too and say his policies align in this spirit all the way through higher ed. He's a strong advocate that, like, City University in New York, CUNY, our colleagues are there, man. I have friends who went to grad school there doing amazing work in education. He believes that if you're a New York City kid, right, that school should be free of tuition for you to attend.
Okay.
And I know a lot of New Yorkers who believe that. And I know some who are going to think, no way. I had to pay my way through there, so the next generation should also have to pay. It's like, hey, hold on, right? Let's practice what we preach, right? If you believe in strong democracy, you believe in educational equity, you believe, especially in, and we'll go away from the higher ed example and back to children, that kids should be given an opportunity to make the most of whatever situation they're in. Well, then you do that through strong public school systems. And I like this idea that the gifted kindergarten program, let's get rid of that in lieu of making sure every kindergartner or every preschooler or every young person has a great start.
Can I ask a question?
Jacob.
Sorry,
go.
Tim. Do you want to go?
No.
Okay,
Please.
here's my question. If we're in New York City and we've got the youngest Rockefeller and we've got little young Johnny Lupinacci, the youngest Rockefeller, if he thinks he's gifted or he's an elite, he wants to go to a nice school, he can go to Andover Prep like George Bush and his parents can pay for that. But the gifted program is here to help a guy who doesn't have a lot of money get that same sort of treatment to go through the system. Is that not true, or am I missing something on that?
I'm going to take a different spin on that for you, Jacob, and see if this makes sense with your question. Johnny points out something that actually you'd say, okay, wealth and what wealth can provide. You're absolutely right, Jacob. Rich people have options. They don't have to rely on the New York City public schools, right? But what's happened over time here with this New York City gifted kindergarten program, it in and of itself has become its own kind of exclusive place for special people and special families, that it's kind of gotten its own sense of whatever, awesome prep school that you could go to, getting accepted as a kindergarten to the New York City gifted program, maybe is just as good, maybe even better than some of the more private elite schools. But, to point out how would you actually make kindergarten, equitable? Well, it's gonna take funding. And first of all, I'm gonna point out and make this some form of a speculation, just in case I'm wrong. But the amount of wealth that's concentrated in the roughly 1,500 to 2,000 kids that get into uh, gifted and talented kindergarten in New York City, they probably have enough money to fully fund incredibly awesome kindergarten, and so that it would be great for all public kids. But I'm gonna bet they would never want to do that, because the reality is that what makes this program the way it is and why people are so ruffled is because it was an exclusivity, a special place that had kind of created its own sense of, this is mine. This is ours. And you're taking away something special for us that actually gave our kids extended privileges. And the reality is that, Johnny, you're right. What I care about is my kid. And so I'm not going to fully fund equitable, awesome education for all kids, because then my kid would just be one of all kids, and my kid ain't one of all kids. Jacob, does that help?
I don't have any kids, so I have no horse in this race. What I could tell you, Dr. Tim, is that as an incredibly gifted person myself, I think that this treatment should be extended in as much as possible to all kindergartners, and especially at those the younger levels. I think it's crazy that you would break people up like that. Kids should have a nice, good standard of education.
Well, and here's the thing, Tim. Even though I'm gonna be, more advocating for, I'm not sure that these programs should exist at all. All right, that's a little extreme. In the case of New York City, there just is overwhelmingly strong evidence that you can't determine this
Yeah.
in kindergarten, right?
Right.
So
Let's
they're
go
saying
back
like,
to
hey,
that.
let's just put a pause on all these programs till third grade.
Okay.
And maybe then they're saying like, hey, third grade, there is an appropriate time in which the assessments, I'm going to pluralize that, so hopefully it's not just take this one test and here you go, you're in the accelerated program, but the assessments say, hey, there's a need here for some accelerated learning for a group of students, and they're going to be served in a different capacity and in this particular grouping. And again, I'm not a big fan of it. That's probably controversial, even in a agree to disagree kind of way. I could be wrong about this thing. I'll admit that. But what seems to be consensus, and we lean on that a lot
Yes.
here,
There we go.
is that you can't determine this in kindergarten. So no one's telling the parent, that's against this, say, hey, but my kid's gifted. It's like, well, actually, we don't necessarily know that in a very real way until maybe later in their educational career, and they'll still have those opportunities ahead of them. But for now, like, they're just kind of like all the other kids. And keep doing the great work that you're doing, because, yep, they know their ABCs a little bit faster than maybe Their neighbor does. Great. Let's get them all together, keep them together for a few years, and see what happens.
My neighbor. You bringing up my neighbor, Johnny Lupinacci?
Uh-oh.
Watch out.
You got a neighbor in New York City.
I gotta tell you though, you're talking about my kid, and my kid Johnny is gifted and is special. Oh, I don't know. What are we gonna do with all of these smart kindergartners? Maybe we'll figure it out when we get back. Woo! Man, you guys thought there was an extra guitar. That was Johnny Lupinacci. Come on.
Oh yeah, ripping through the
Ripping
scales.
through. Busted pencils, fully leaded. Education talk, educated educators, talking education, talking gifted education. More specifically, New York City kindergarten giftedness. Democratic nominee for mayor Zoran Mamdani is proposing to do away with gifted kindergartening. Man, we've had a discussion kind of all over the place on this. I'm going to guess, though, that between all three of us, that we are really, adamantly and very strongly saying, like, hold on, kindergarten, no. We got to at least stop the sorting and give these kids a little bit more time to potentially developmentally, show some things that maybe a 4-year-old isn't showing, but maybe when they're 8, holy crap. Can I say that we all agree you can't tell if a kindergartner is gifted, or maybe you can, but maybe you can't know kids who will be gifted potentially, is what we're saying. How's that sound?
Yeah, I'll go along with that.
Okay.
Leave
Jacob?
the children alone, Tim. They're just trying to eat their paste and learn their letters. We don't have to treat all the kindergartners like Russian figure skaters and drill them from the time they're born into these perfect products.
Nice.
Yeah, agreed. Let the Utes be Utes.
Exactly.
What is it? David Bowie, and these children that you spit on. You got, come on, nobody can finish that?
Well, I was hoping you could, because you just said the weirdest
Yeah.
part.
Well,
Yeah.
we're talking about Changes, an incredibly awesome song. It was the ending quote of The Breakfast Club. David Bowie, the lyrics from Changes. These children that you spit on as they try to change their world. Come on.
Are immune to your consultations.
There you go.
Yeah.
There you go. Right.
But you don't sound like David Bowie. Can't you? Do you have?
I don't have a David Bowie voice. No, I can't. I got a good neighbor voice, but I don't have a David Bowie voice. Sorry about that.
Right before the changes.
There, see, Johnny's got that voice. No, they're kids, as you said, Jacob. My God, what are we doing? If anything, let's really take seriously childhood and acknowledge that every 4-year-old, if that's when they're going to start kindergarten, or 5-year, deserves a gifted education, regardless of what their standardized test score might be later on in life, because we're talking about early childhood experiences, and there is nothing in the research that says you get anything but benefit when you provide more and more opportunity the younger and younger the kids are. And
early interventions, man.
That's it,
Early
Johnny. You
interventions.
point out about this all the time. It's an investment too. I mean, you know what?
Yeah.
Make kindergarten great again. There we go. What do you guys
Hey.
think?
Well,
Jake?
you know, we talked about it when we talked about the importance of Sesame Street and really great shows like that. I mean, it's all pours into our child care system, right?
And
The more we support caring about children.
I'll try to get those Make Kindergarten Great Again hats ready for the next week. So I'll see what we can do in the merch department.
Make kindergarten. I don't. That doesn't come off like a MAGA or a MAHA. though, does it?
Doesn't flow off the tongue so well.
Oh, no. I think, and Johnny, to point out too, like this happens too, is that this will end up becoming an issue for people that they make their voting decision on. And the reality is, here's like, you want to be a great democratic citizen. There isn't any politician who's going to tick every box for you. It's kind of looking at this because Johnny, actually, his proposal, as you point out, for early childhood healthcare and things like that. Come on, man. I think you're right. If he pulls that off, wow, can you imagine what they call kindergarten readiness? Can you imagine how many more kids would be, quote, ready for kindergarten? Wow. I don't know. So much more though, but you know what time it is though, Johnny? It's time for your moment of zen. You do things again and again, and nothing happens. It requires patience, but not a passive patience, the patience of activism.
Thanks, listeners, for being patient with us today and listening to the broadcast. Remember to grab great podcasts chock full with all kinds of fully leaded education talk on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and of course, you can always find us at the Civic Media website or on our website, bustedpencils.com. And don't you dare be late for homeroom on Monday. And make sure you catch next week's class and session on Wednesday. And you can always find us on Friday for producer Jacob's Choice. And just like today, you can tune in and listen to Busted Pencils broadcast at 3 p.m. Central Time across all the Civic Media Network stations for 1 hour of your favorite blue-collar scholars, Tim and Johnny, and keep busting pencils.